I was in the middle of helping customers at my shop when a message popped up on my phone. It read, "I'm leaving you and taking off to Miami with my 20-year-old girlfriend. By the way, I already emptied our joint account. Ha ha." I didn't even pause. I kept on showing Mrs. Peterson some new scarves, my hands steady and my voice perfectly calm. The only sign that my husband of 12 years had just obliterated our marriage via text was a slight tightness in my eyes. Once Mrs. Peterson left, her purchase wrapped in our signature silver paper, I typed out a brief reply. "Good luck." My name is Alexis, and at 38, I just received one of the most ruthless farewells in history. But while Ethan was probably congratulating himself on his grand exit, imagining me in tears over his betrayal, I was quietly locking up my boutique for the night. All the warning signals had been flashing for months. Those late work nights that never matched his check stubs, the sudden lock screens on his phone, how he'd taken up the gym obsessively, buying new outfits as though to rewind his own clock. 3 months ago, I found a receipt from an expensive restaurant, dated the same evening he'd claimed to be working late. That very night, I opened a separate bank account in a different institution. A week later, when he casually suggested merging our finances for simplicity's sake, I'd agreed cheerfully, even as I shuffled my personal savings into that new account. The joint account he just drained had been stocked with just enough money to keep him from suspecting a thing, maybe 2 months' worth of regular deposits. The rest was safely stowed away, along with detailed proof of every suspicious expense he'd racked up in the past year. My phone buzzed again. "Don't bother begging. Tiffany and I leave tomorrow. I'll send for my stuff later." Tiffany, the new receptionist at his company. I'd seen her at the last Christmas party, watched her laugh just a bit too loudly at Ethan's jokes, noticed how she'd gently touch his arm when she thought no one else was watching. Young enough to be his daughter, naive enough to assume she was one of a kind. I didn't write back. Instead, I called my lawyer, the same one I'd called 2 months prior after discovering hotel charges on our credit card. "It's time," I said flatly. "He just made his move." "The paperwork is ready," she told me. "I'll file first thing tomorrow. Want me to have him served in Miami?" "No hurry. Let him think he's winning, for now." Another text from Ethan. "Must be tough, right? You're not getting any younger, you know. At least there's that little shop of yours to keep busy." My so-called little shop. The same boutique I'd built from the ground up. The same one that made more money than his middle management gig. The one whose profits I diligently kept separate from our communal funds. A few weeks went by before Ethan's attorney contacted mine. Turns out he was shocked I'd filed for divorce before he could even serve me. Now he was curious what I wanted. "Tell him I want everything," I informed my lawyer. "The house, the car, the dog, and full custody of the children." "He's never going to sign off on that," my lawyer cautioned. "Oh, he will," I said with full confidence. "He doesn't have any other choice." I was right. Ethan realized that if he refused, I'd go public with his affair and ruin his reputation. He also knew I had the receipts, enough evidence to wipe him out in court. So he penned his name, and I got it all. I sold the house and the car, then moved into a gorgeous new apartment with my kids. I also landed a new job that paid double my former salary. And Ethan? He lost nearly everything. His wife, his kids, his car, his career, and even his pride. I caught myself smiling, picturing the official letters that'd greet him in Miami. Let him bask in that fleeting moment of glee. I spent the evening in our home, technically my home, since I'd inherited it from my grandmother and never added him to the deed, despite his repeated nudges. Another instance where my instincts served me well. Sorting through the documentation my lawyer had requested, I stumbled on our wedding album. Ethan once looked so different, back before his midlife unraveling turned him into a faded parody of himself. Now, he wore tight shirts that highlighted his growing paunch, tried way too hard to fit in with the 20-somethings at his job, spoke in a slang that felt painful coming from a 45-year-old. Meanwhile, my phone pinged relentlessly with more texts from him, each one more insulting than the last. "I've been planning this for months," one read. "Tiffany understands me in ways you never could. You'll be fine. Maybe you'll find someone your own age. Already told my family. They agree this was inevitable. It's nobody's fault, really." I took screenshots, saving them in a newly labeled evidence folder. Let him keep digging his own grave. My attorney would absolutely adore his casual confessions of forethought, his cocky brag about clearing out our bank account. One text in particular stopped me. "BTW, I used the shared card to book our plane tickets and hotel. Consider that my going away present, LOL." Perfect. I dialed the credit card company. "Hello, Ms. Archer speaking." "Hello, I need to file a fraud dispute and cancel a card immediately." "Certainly, ma'am. Could you detail the charges in question?" 2 first-class seats to Miami, booked today, plus hotel reservations at the Royal Palm. I'll also be removing my husband as an authorized user. I've got text proof of him admitting to using our shared card for a personal trip with his girlfriend right after wiping our bank account. Happy to forward it if needed. I could detect a slight satisfaction in the representative's voice as she voided the charges. Ethan and Tiffany would show up at the airport only to discover their tickets were worthless, their resort booking invalidated. Another buzz on my phone. "Forget the house. You can stay put until you find someplace cheaper." I legit laughed out loud at that. Did he seriously think he was entitled to my grandmother's house? Had his arrogance grown so colossal that he'd forgotten who actually held the title? Yet another message. "And I know the shop matters to you. We can negotiate a fair price for your share." My share. Of the business I'd started, funded, and run solo, while he griped about my long hours and dismissed it as my hobby. I poured myself a glass of high-end wine I'd saved for a special night. This definitely qualified. In the morning, Ethan would get a crash course on property rights and separate assets. But tonight, I'd relish the calm and plan my next move. Sunrise ushered in a string of furious messages from Ethan. "What did you do to our credit card? The airline invalidated our seats. The hotel canceled our stay. Answer me." I just muted his number and drove to my boutique. Friday was one of my peak sales days, and a brand new collection of designer purses awaited unpacking. Life moves on, even when your spouse vanishes with a receptionist young enough to be his kid. Midday, his mother called. "Alexis, dear, Ethan told us everything about how you've been so controlling." I hung up. Didn't need that drama. A couple of days later, Ethan had the audacity to reappear, pleading for mercy. I didn't indulge him. He'd made his bed, so he could lie in it. As for me, I was thriving. My boutique's revenue skyrocketed, and for the first time I felt free, really free, to shape my life how I wanted. I picked out a new car, traveled to Europe, even dipped my toe back into the dating pool. Things were fantastic. Meanwhile, Ethan sank deeper. He lost his wife, his home, his reputation. He ended up in a lackluster apartment, working some dead-end job, dating a woman solely interested in what money he had left. "You drove him away," he said. "Now you're just being spiteful, causing issues with his flights." I put her on speaker while positioning a fresh storefront display. Did he mention that he cleaned out our joint account and charged plane tickets for him and his girlfriend on our credit card? Silence. Then, well, he said you left him no choice, that you were cold and distant. Caroline, I have the texts. Would you care to hear them? Maybe the ones boasting about stealing our money, or the part where he insulted my age? A brief hesitation. He did sound fairly mean. I scolded him over that text message. I appreciate the call, Caroline. I've always liked you, but it's best to leave it here. My legal counsel advised me to limit contact with Ethan's relatives while this is ongoing. Legal proceedings? Already? Goodbye, Caroline. By late afternoon, Ethan's sister Jacqueline was stirring up family chatter among mutual friends. Supposedly, Ethan and Tiffany were marooned in a dingy motel near the airport, their Miami fantasies postponed indefinitely. He'd attempted to use personal credit cards, but they'd already been maxed. Yet another red flag I'd spotted months ago. My lawyer filled me in on the progress. We've scheduled an emergency hearing for Monday. Considering he fessed up to draining your joint account and committing open credit card fraud, we're in a strong position to freeze any leftover assets. Has he been served? Not yet, but soon he'll be at that motel. And guess what? Tiffany's been posting all over her socials about this so-called adventure, including a few colorful remarks about me. I grinned, thinking of my collection of receipts. A year's worth of shady charges, hotel bills, plus damning texts confirming intent. He'd been so focused on his big getaway that he never considered I might be observing silently, one step ahead. The phone buzzed again with a message from Ethan. You think you're clever, but I made photocopies of the boutique's financials. Half that place is mine. I forwarded the text to my attorney, adding it to the ever-growing file of self-incriminations. He'd learned soon enough that a personally launched small business, established before marriage, and strictly documented as separate property, plus robust record-keeping, would keep him from a dime of it. That Monday's emergency hearing was everything I hoped. Ethan waltzed in sporting clothes intended for a younger crowd, skinny designer jeans that didn't suit his body, an obnoxious blazer that screamed midlife meltdown. Tiffany hovered outside the courtroom, her youthful glow stark under the fluorescent lights. My lawyer systematically unveiled all the evidence: Ethan's smug text about emptying our account, the blatant credit card fraud, months of undisclosed spending, each piece neatly documented thanks to my cautious approach. Your Honor, began Ethan's flustered attorney, while my client admits to some impulsive decisions, Ms. Archer's methods are petty, verging on vindictive. Vindictive? My lawyer shot back. We call it prudent. My client simply safeguarded her own earnings and tracked her husband's dubious actions. That's not vindictive, it's intelligent. The judge leafed through the papers, showing how the house deed was solely in my name, how the boutique was established as a separate corporation well before the marriage, and how meticulously I'd maintained those financial lines. Ethan used to laugh at my obsessive bookkeeping, but now it was saving me. Mr. Archer, the judge addressed him, you concede abandoning your spouse, liquidating joint funds, and attempting to use a shared credit card for personal travel with your girlfriend. You've willfully ignored your fiduciary responsibilities. Ms. Archer's response, although not ideal, is understandable. The ruling went my way. Ethan owed significant spousal support and child support. He also had to repay all the money he squandered with Tiffany. Ethan ambled out of court, looking devastated. Tiffany stomped off in a huff. I left with my head high. Victory felt sweet. I returned to my shop and got to work. There was a business to run and a life to rebuild, and neither Ethan nor anyone else would stand in my way. One exchange stuck in my mind, with the judge practically scolding Ethan about texting me to brag he'd drained the bank account. "Is it true, Mr. Archer?" the judge asked, "that you typed these words? By the way, I already emptied our joint account. Ha ha ha. Did you really think that wouldn't be used against you?" Ethan's face glowed crimson, eyes darting around the courtroom. He stuttered some excuse about wanting a clean break. A clean break? By committing fraud? The judge didn't buy it. Then Ethan's lawyer tried to claim that my boutique expanded during our marriage, so Ethan deserved a share. My lawyer wasted no time in response. Everything's precisely documented as separate property, purchased before the marriage. Here are the records of each deposit, expense, and tax filing. Ethan's confusion only deepened as each argument collapsed. He never truly understood how vital it was that I keep flawless records, or that my so-called little hobby turned a bigger profit than his day job. The court froze all shared assets while the divorce finalized. Ethan was told to reimburse any misused funds within 24 hours. "But it's gone," he whined. "We spent it on—" "Then figure it out," the judge snapped. "This court takes a dim view of indulging in extramarital romps on joint credit." Outside, as I made my exit, I vaguely heard Tiffany begging Ethan about their Miami itinerary. My heels tapped confidently on the stone floor, carrying me back to a company he never appreciated. In the days that followed, Ethan grew desperate. He claimed he'd come up with the concept for the boutique, that he'd secretly invested money, that he was basically my partner. In each instance, my accounts and logs thoroughly disproved him. "He's flailing," my attorney observed. "Tiffany's Instagram suggests they're cramped in her tiny studio. The newfound romance doesn't look as glamorous as they hoped." Ethan's family started approaching me too, sounding contrite. "We had no clue," his sister Jacqueline admitted. "He told us you were a bully, that he had to flee. Then we read his messages, the bragging about stealing your money. That's not who we thought he was." His mom called again in tears. "Those statements about your age, about him trading you in, I raised him better than that, or at least I thought I did." I let them leave voicemails, uninterested in bridging old wounds. Gossip around town, ironically, boosted business at my store. People came to show solidarity, often leaving with more purchases than planned. "My ex tried something similar," one customer told me, selecting a high-end handbag. "Men like that are sure we can't outsmart them." Texts from Ethan still arrived sporadically, his tone lurching from fury to fake regret. "You ruined my life. I never meant to hurt you." I blocked him. That chance came and went. He tried one last manipulative approach. "You'll regret being so revenge-obsessed. Let's compromise. That shop would be nothing without me." Each line I forwarded to my attorney without comment. Through mutual friends, I heard Tiffany was having serious second thoughts. Reality had set in. An older man with no funds, living in her cramped unit. No fancy dinners, no spontaneous getaways, no illusions left. Her social posts referenced toxic relationships and lessons learned. She dropped "in a relationship" from her profile. I might have felt sympathy if it weren't for her earlier crows about snagging Ethan from me. Ultimately, I just felt proud of myself for paying attention, for planning ahead, for protecting what was mine, and for forging a better future on my terms. The final hearing hammered in the last nails to Ethan's fantasies. Gone was his cocky attitude. Tiffany was absent, apparently done with him. Ethan came wearing old clothes. the flashy new wardrobe presumably returned to repay our joint account. His attorney looked fatigued, likely from discovering zero loopholes in my meticulously prepared files. Your Honor, my client contributed moral support to Ms. Archer's business. Moral support? Like the texts calling it her little shop? Or the social media digs referring to it as her silly hobby? My lawyer countered. The judge, unimpressed, promptly sided with my records. I retained my house, my independent business, and my personal funds. Ethan got his old car, which was worth significantly less than the balance he owed on it. You've ruined me, he spat outside the courtroom, his fury barely contained. I'm stuck moving in with my parents. No, Ethan, I replied calmly. You destroyed yourself. I just ensured you couldn't take me down with you. His mother stood waiting, prepared to drive him to her place. Yes, that was his new address, at 45 years old. The man who insulted my age was now living under his parents' roof while I grew my successful shop. You planned all this, he accused, clearly deflated. You knew exactly what would happen. Number Y merely paid attention. Unlike you, I knew how valuable careful documentation can be. His mother stepped in. That's enough, Ethan. You've disgraced yourself enough already. I heard her fuss at him as they crossed the parking lot. What were you thinking? A 20-year-old? Draining accounts? Sending those hateful messages? I watched them fade into the distance, feeling only relief. He'd assumed his nasty text would finalize our story. Actually, it just unleashed the plan I'd been quietly assembling. My phone chimed, not from Ethan, but from new online orders at my boutique's website. Life was forging ahead, not quite in the direction he'd envisioned. 6 months post-divorce, my boutique expanded to a second branch, an ironic twist given Ethan's prior mockery. I hired additional staff, launched an e-commerce site gaining traction nationwide. Word on Ethan's predicament filtered through the grapevine. He tried various dating platforms, but women around his age had zero interest in a middle-aged man bunking with mom and dad. Younger women, warned by Tiffany's circle, avoided him too. She'd shared screenshots of his attempts to woo her back. Work life suffered. HR discovered his fling with a junior staffer, slapped him with an official reprimand. The promotion he once expected went to someone else with a cleaner record. He accused them of age discrimination, Jacqueline confided one afternoon. Claims they're punishing him for dating younger. I just shook my head. My lawyer updated me that Ethan kept petitioning to alter the settlement. Each submission was denied. All attempts at unfair distribution dismissed by the weight of evidence proving his wrongdoing. He insisted that text about draining the account was just a joke, my lawyer said, chuckling. The judge asked if ha somehow negates theft. My boutique thrived. Business publications contacted me, intrigued by the story of a sharp entrepreneur who protected her business from a messy divorce. Young professionals sought advice on maintaining boundaries between personal and professional assets. Protecting yourself isn't paranoia, I told one particularly bright college grad. Never doubt your own instincts. Ethan's mother occasionally phoned me, usually after he'd pulled another stunt, trying to gamble online for a quick score or investing in a pyramid scheme. Each fiasco only buried him deeper. I don't know where we failed him, she lamented. His father and I said we'd help him if he owned up to his failings, but he still blames everyone else. Tiffany, you, the courts, the judge. I listened politely, without offering false comfort. His problems no longer concerned me. My world was bigger now, planning a third boutique and possibly branching into upscale accessories. The only keepsake from that ordeal was a framed shot of Ethan's final text before I blocked him. "Enjoy your dumb boutique. It'll keep you busy as you get old." Beneath it rested my latest business award, a shining reminder that success is sometimes the best revenge. A year after we finalized our divorce, I threw a grand opening for my third boutique. It was even more spacious and stylish than the first two. Glancing around at the smiling faces of clients, employees, and friends, I felt true pride. I was flourishing, financially stable, and absolutely free. Meanwhile, Ethan? He was still at his parents' place, stuck in a repetitive job, clueless about how it had all gone so wrong. Sometimes karma's downright poetic. Exactly 1 year after that infamous text, the local press came to highlight my fast-growing business rather than my marital drama. The fiasco with Ethan had become little more than an asterisk in my overall success narrative. Out of nowhere, Tiffany showed up. She looked younger than I recalled. Or maybe I felt older, stronger by comparison. She clutched her bag, visibly uneasy. "I owe you an apology," she began quietly. I swallowed all the lies he fed me. That you were cold, controlling, that he needed rescuing. I stayed silent, fiddling with an elegant display of designer sunglasses. Then, after living with him, I saw the same old games. Those weren't hopes or aspirations, just escapes. "He used me too," Tiffany said. "I'm dating someone my own age now. It's not perfect, but at least we're real." As she walked away, my assistant asked softly, "Was that the girlfriend?" "No," I answered. "Just another woman who found out the truth, just like I did." Even so, the experience shaped my boutique into more than a retail spot. It was a sign of freedom, resilience, and the power in being prepared. Aspiring entrepreneurs often asked me how I stayed calm in the face of betrayal. I always stressed the importance of self-protection. One final call came from Ethan's mother, not to talk about him, but to say thank you. "You showed us we can't keep making excuses for destructive behavior." Ethan's still at home, blaming everyone else for his meltdown. "But we're not covering for him now. That's the lesson you gave us. The difference between supporting someone and enabling them." I pondered that idea, flipping through expansion plans for a fourth location. Ethan's big plan was to degrade me, to upgrade to a younger model, and claim half of what I'd built. Ironically, in trying to tear me down, he just propelled me to become stronger, more successful. A text popped up from my attorney. Ethan tried yet again to revisit the settlement. Judge instantly denied it and demanded he pay more legal fees. Figured you'd appreciate that. I couldn't help but grin, imagining him in his childhood bedroom, frantic to revise a conclusion that was set the second he underestimated me. Indeed, the finest revenge isn't fighting back with equal cruelty. It's outgrowing the battle entirely. 2 years have passed since Ethan's smug text. One morning, I found an invitation to speak at a local women in business conference. They didn't want me to talk about heartbreak or divorces. They wanted me to discuss forging a profitable brand, about standing on your own financially, about recognizing your own worth. Standing on that stage, scanning a crowd of curious, determined faces, I realized the journey wasn't about heartbreak or vengeance. It was about finding strength you never knew you possessed, about shaping your own joy, and about deciding on your own ending. That, I finally knew for sure, was the sweetest revenge of them all.